The billionaire stood frozen in aisle 9 of a Walmart in Roxbury, Boston, watching a young black woman count pennies in the palm of her trembling hand. Not dollars, pennies. She counted them twice, then a third time. And each time she reached the same number. And each time her shoulders dropped a little more. And each time she quietly pulled one more item out of her cart and set it on the shelf like she was apologizing to it. A jar of peanut butter, back on the shelf. A small bag of apples, back on the shelf. A carton of eggs. She held it the longest, staring at it like it was a decision she'd been avoiding her whole life. And then, slowly, she put that back too. Her two small children stood beside the cart. A little boy, maybe 7 years old, wearing sneakers held together with silver tape. A little girl, maybe 4, clutching a stuffed bear that had one eye missing. Neither of them said a word. Neither of them complained, because they already knew. Children who grow up poor learn silence the way other children learn nursery rhymes. And Marcus Johnson, 42 years old, worth $3.8 billion, CEO of one of the largest tech logistics companies in America, felt something crack open inside his chest that he had spent 30 years welding shut. Because he had seen this scene before. He had lived this scene before. 29 years ago, in a Winn-Dixie in Birmingham, Alabama, his own mother had counted pennies in the exact same way, had put a jar of peanut butter back on the exact same kind of shelf, had told her hungry son the exact same lie that every poor mother tells her children. Mama already ate, baby. You go on and finish yours. And now, standing in aisle 9, Marcus Johnson watched the young mother turn to her little boy, smile the smile that only broken mothers know how to smile, and say 5 words that stopped his heart cold. Mama's not hungry tonight, sweetheart. Marcus didn't move. Marcus couldn't move. Because for the first time in 29 years, the wall he had built around his grief cracked wide open. And everything he had buried came pouring out in a Walmart in Roxbury on a Tuesday afternoon. What he did next would change 3 lives forever. And it would begin with a single receipt. Marcus Johnson had not cried in 29 years. He remembered the exact date he stopped. October 14th, 1997. He was 13 years old. He had come home from school to find his mother, Dolores Johnson, collapsed on the linoleum kitchen floor of their 2-bedroom apartment in the Titusville neighborhood of Birmingham. The kettle was still whistling on the stove. A pot of grits was burning on the back burner. And his mother, his beautiful, exhausted 41-year-old mother, was gone. The doctors called it a massive coronary event. They said her heart had simply given out. They said it was rare in someone her age, but not impossible, especially in a woman who had worked 3 jobs for 18 years, who had never seen a doctor in her adult life, who had raised a son alone after his father disappeared before he could walk. Marcus had another word for what killed his mother. He called it exhaustion. He called it the slow, invisible violence of American poverty, the kind that doesn't show up on death certificates, the kind that doesn't make the news, the kind that just quietly eats mothers alive from the inside out, while everyone looks the other way. At the funeral, Marcus did not cry. He stood in a suit 2 sizes too big, donated by a church deacon named Mr. Willie, and he watched them lower his mother into the red Alabama clay. And he made himself a promise. He promised he would become so rich, so powerful, so untouchable, that no one would ever again look at him and see a poor black boy from Titusville. He promised he would never again feel the shame of watching his mother count pennies in a checkout line. He promised he would build a fortress of money so tall and so thick that grief could never find him again. And he had done it. He had done all of it. By the time he was 35, he was worth $1 billion. By 40, he was worth $3 billion. He owned a penthouse in Manhattan, a mansion in Atlanta, a summer home in Martha's Vineyard, where Black excellence gathered every August to drink champagne and pretend the ancestors couldn't see them. He wore suits that cost more than his mother had earned in 6 months. He rode in cars with drivers named James and Anthony, who called him Sir. He sat on the boards of 3 Fortune 500 companies and 1 Ivy League university. And he had not cried in 29 years. Not once. Not when his grandmother died in 2004. Not when his childhood best friend was killed by a stray bullet in 2011. Not when his fiancée, Vanessa, left him in 2018 because, as she put it, "You don't love, Marcus. You just accumulate." She was right. He knew she was right. But he did not cry when she left either. He had built the fortress well. And on a Tuesday afternoon in October 2026, 29 years almost to the day after the morning he had come home to a whistling kettle and a dead mother, Marcus Johnson walked into a Walmart in Roxbury, Boston, to buy a phone charger. That was all. Just a phone charger. He was in Boston for a board meeting at MIT. His car battery had died in his rental.
His assistant, Denise, had told him there was a Walmart 3 blocks away. He didn't want to send a driver. He wanted, for reasons he could not explain even to himself, to walk. To feel the October air, to move like a normal person for 15 minutes of his life. He walked in through the automatic doors. He passed the greeters. He walked past the seasonal aisle where they had already started putting out Christmas decorations, even though Halloween was still 2 weeks away. He walked past the pharmacy. He turned into aisle 9, looking for the electronics section. And that was when he saw her. The young mother, the 2 silent children, the pennies in her palm. And a scene from 1997 came rushing back to him, with the force of a train hitting a wall.
Her name was Ayanna Bennett. She was 28 years old. She had been raising her 2 children alone for 4 years, ever since her husband Terrence had been killed in a workplace accident at a warehouse in Chelsea. The insurance settlement had lasted 18 months. The savings had lasted 11. The kindness of family had lasted 6. After that, it was just her. She worked 2 jobs. From 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., she was a certified nursing assistant at a rehabilitation facility in Jamaica Plain, changing bed sheets and lifting elderly patients and cleaning up things no one wants to clean up, for $17.85 an hour. From 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., 4 nights a week, she stocked shelves at a CVS in Dorchester for $16.20 an hour. On weekends, when she could get someone to watch the kids, she cleaned houses in Newton and Brookline for cash, anywhere from $80 to $120 a day. She was tired in a way that had no bottom. Her son, Jamal, was 7 years old. He was in 2nd grade at the Trotter Elementary School. He was reading at a 5th grade level. His teacher, Mrs. Coleman, had already told Ayanna that Jamal was gifted, that he should be tested for the Advanced Learners Program, that he had a mind like a diamond. Ayanna had smiled and thanked Mrs. Coleman and cried in her car for 20 minutes afterward because she did not know how she was going to pay for the testing fee, or the enrichment programs, or the summer camps that gifted children were supposed to attend. Her daughter Zuri was 4 years old. She was small for her age, She had asthma. Her inhaler cost $84 a month, even with the state insurance. She loved butterflies. She had never been to a zoo or an aquarium or a museum. Her favorite toy was a one-eyed stuffed bear named Bear Bear that Ayanna had bought for $2 at a Goodwill in Mattapan when Zuri was 2. Ayanna loved her children with a ferocity that scared her sometimes. And on that Tuesday afternoon in October 2026, standing in aisle 9 of a Walmart in Roxbury, she was doing the math for the 3rd time in her head. And the math was not working. She had $23.47 in her checking account. She would not get paid again until Friday. Rent was due in 6 days. Her car, a 2011 Honda Civic with 218,000 miles on it, had made a noise on the drive over that she was trying to pretend she had not heard. She had come to Walmart with a list of 17 items. She was now down to 11, then 10, then 9. She put the eggs back on the shelf and told herself she would figure out breakfast some other way. There were still 2 slices of bread at home. There was still peanut butter, a different jar, an older one, with maybe 2 tablespoons left.
Jamal could have that.
Zuri could have oatmeal. The generic oatmeal, the kind that came in a giant cardboard cylinder for $2.98, which she was buying today, which she would stretch across 7 mornings, which she would flavor with cinnamon and a little brown sugar, so her children would not know that they were eating the cheapest food in the store. She turned to Jamal and forced a smile. She said the words her own mother had said to her decades ago in a grocery store in Mobile, Alabama. She said, "Mama's not hungry tonight, sweetheart." Jamal looked up at her. His eyes were too old for his face. He did not argue. He did not question. He simply nodded the way he always nodded, and he took his little sister's hand. And behind them, unseen, a billionaire in a $6,000 suit was falling apart in the middle of aisle 9. Marcus followed them to the checkout. He did not know why. He told himself, later, that his feet had simply moved on their own. That some old part of him, the part he thought he had killed off in 1997, had woken up and taken over his body. He watched from 3 registers away as Ayanna placed her items on the belt. 9 items. She had started with 17, and she was down to 9. Bread, peanut butter, generic oatmeal, a gallon of milk, a bag of rice, a pack of chicken thighs on manager's markdown, 2 cans of black beans, a bunch of bananas that were already spotted brown, a single roll of toilet paper. 9 items to feed a family of 3 for 3 days. The cashier, a young Latina woman named Sophia, according to her name tag, scanned everything without a word. The total came up on the screen: $27.94. Ayanna stared at the number. Marcus watched her stare. She had $23.47. She was $4.47 short. And Marcus watched her do the math on her face. The small tightening at the corner of her mouth, the way her eyes closed for just half a second, the way her hand went up to touch her hairline as if to steady herself. And he watched her turn back to her cart and reach for the milk. The last thing she was going to sacrifice, because milk was for her daughter. Because milk was for the asthma medication that made Zuri hungry all the time. Because milk was the difference between a mother's love and a mother's failure. And Marcus Johnson, billionaire, stepped forward. He did not say anything dramatic. He did not make a scene. He did not throw money around. He simply walked up to the register, pulled out a black metal card that most Americans have never seen in person,
and said quietly, "I've got this one." Ayanna turned. Their eyes met. And in that single second, Marcus saw everything. He saw his mother, standing in that Winn-Dixie in 1996, doing the same math, feeling the same shame, wearing the same expression that was somehow both proud and shattered at the same time. He saw a woman who had not been touched with kindness by a stranger in so long that she did not know how to receive it. He saw the specific, particular exhaustion of a black woman in America who has been told all her life that she is supposed to be strong, that she is supposed to be a warrior, that she is supposed to carry the world and never complain, and never rest, and never ask for help, and who has been carrying it without help for so long that her back has become the shape of the burden. And Ayanna Bennett saw Marcus too. She saw a tall, well-dressed black man with kind eyes and a jaw that was working hard to hold back something powerful. She saw money. She saw class. She saw the kind of man who did not belong in a Walmart in Roxbury at 3:47 on a Tuesday afternoon. She saw someone who, for reasons she did not understand, was looking at her like he already knew her. She opened her mouth to say no. Every instinct she had, every hard-won, generational instinct passed down from her mother and her grandmother and every black woman who had ever survived America, told her to say no. Because pride was the last thing they could not take from you. Because charity came with strings. Because a man who paid for your groceries in a Walmart might expect something in return. And she had been that woman before. And she had promised herself she would never be that woman again. She opened her mouth to say no. But Marcus, seeing her mouth open, spoke first. Softly, gently, in the voice of a son who had learned, too late, how to speak to his mother. He said, "Please, it's not for you. It's for someone who couldn't do this for me a long time ago." And something in his voice, some raw, cracked-open honesty, made Ayanna close her mouth. She looked at him. She looked at her son, Jamal, who was watching this exchange with the careful eyes of a child who had learned to read adults the way other children read comic books. She looked at her daughter, Zuri, who was holding Bear and staring at Marcus with the pure, unguarded curiosity that only 4-year-olds still possess. And Ayanna Bennett, who had not accepted help from a stranger in 4 years, nodded once, just barely, and whispered, "Thank you." Marcus paid. The total came to $27.94. He asked Sophia for the receipt. He folded it carefully and put it in the inside pocket of his suit jacket, right over his heart, the way a man might carry a photograph of someone he had loved and lost. He walked out of the Walmart. He got into his car. And for the first time in 29 years, Marcus Johnson put his head down on the steering wheel and sobbed. Denise Okonkwo had been Marcus Johnson's executive assistant for 11 years. She was 54 years old. She was Nigerian by birth and American by choice. She had raised 3 children of her own, put 2 of them through medical school, and she knew Marcus Johnson better than his own therapist did. Mostly because Marcus did not have a therapist, and Denise had been telling him for a decade that he should. When her phone rang at 4:23 p.m. on that Tuesday afternoon, she saw Marcus's name on the screen and answered on the first ring. "Yes, Marcus." There was a pause. A long pause. She could hear him breathing. And then she heard something she had never heard in 11 years of working for him. She heard him crying. Denise sat down in her office chair. She closed her laptop. She waited. Finally, in a voice that was raw and unfamiliar, Marcus said, "Denise, I need you to find someone for me." "Who?"
Her name is Ayanna Bennett. She was at the Walmart in Roxbury this afternoon. She has 2 kids, a boy, maybe 7, a girl, maybe 4. I need to know everything about her. Where she lives, where she works, what she needs, what she owes, what she's dreaming of. All of it. Denise did not ask questions. She had learned over 11 years when to ask questions and when to simply say yes. She said, "How much can I spend?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Whatever it takes. But Denise, listen to me. She cannot know it's coming from me. Not directly. Not yet. This has to be done right. This has to be done with respect. This isn't charity. This is something else. Do you understand me?" Denise understood. She had grown up in Lagos. Her father had died when she was 6. She had watched her own mother count her own pennies in her own grocery store, and she had understood from a very young age that the difference between charity and dignity was often just the way the help arrived. She said, "I understand, Marcus. I'll have preliminary information within 24 hours. She hung up. She turned back to her laptop. She opened a new folder on her secure server. She labeled it Project Dolores. She had worked for Marcus long enough to know exactly what she was looking at. By 9 a.m. the next morning, Denise had assembled a file. Ayanna Bennett, 28 years old, born in Mobile, Alabama. Moved to Boston at age 19 to attend Roxbury Community College, where she had completed 1 year of a 2-year nursing program before dropping out to work full-time and support her mother, who had been diagnosed with lupus. Married Terrence Bennett in 2018. 1 son, Jamal, born 2019. 1 daughter, Zuri, born 2022. Widowed in 2022 when Terrence was killed at his workplace. The company had settled for $312,000, a number that seemed large until you subtracted the funeral costs, the medical bills, the lawyer's cut, the 4 months of rent she had missed while grieving, the credit card debt she had accumulated trying to keep the family fed. Current employment: 2 jobs, totaling approximately 58 hours a week. Current income: approximately $2,750 per month after taxes. Current rent: $1,850 per month for a 2-bedroom apartment on Blue Hill Avenue in Dorchester. Current debts: $4,200 in credit card debt across 3 cards. $780 outstanding on a medical bill from Zuri's last asthma-related emergency room visit. $340 outstanding on a utility bill that was in her name. And, most crucially, $18,700 remaining on her original nursing school loans from 2016, which had been in deferment but were about to come out of deferment in 90 days. Denise read the file twice. She noticed something. She noticed several things, actually. Small details that were not visible in any single line of data, but became visible when you looked at the whole picture. She noticed that Ayanna had not missed a rent payment in 4 years. Not one. Even in the worst months. She noticed that Ayanna's credit score, despite her debt, was 671, which was low but not devastating, and which suggested that this was a woman who paid what she could when she could. She noticed that Jamal was enrolled in a public school that had a gifted and talented program, but Jamal was not enrolled in that program, even though his standardized test scores from 1st grade indicated he should have been. She noticed that Zuri was on the state's children's health insurance program, but she was not enrolled in the state's early childhood asthma management program, which would have covered her inhalers at no cost. She noticed that Ayana was one class short of her CNA to LPN bridge certification, a certification that would raise her hourly wage from $17.85 to $28.40 overnight. She noticed that there were 3 separate scholarship programs in the greater Boston area, all of them explicitly designed for single mothers of color completing nursing certifications, all of them currently under-enrolled, all of them requiring only an application that took less than an hour to complete. Denise closed the file. She sat back in her chair. She thought about her own mother in Lagos. And then she picked up the phone and called Marcus. She said, "It's not that she needs money, Marcus. She needs information. She needs access. She needs someone to open the doors she doesn't even know are there." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Marcus said quietly, "That's exactly what my mother needed." "I know," Denise said. "That's why you had me build the file this way." "What do we do next?" Denise smiled. She had been waiting for this question. "We don't hand her money, Marcus. We hand her keys." Marcus could not sleep that night. He lay in the presidential suite of the Four Seasons in Boston, in a bed that cost his company $2,400 a night, and he stared at the ceiling and thought about his mother. Dolores Johnson had been born in 1956 in a town called Marion, Alabama. Her father was a sharecropper. Her mother had died in childbirth when Dolores was 9, leaving her the oldest daughter of 6 children, which meant that Dolores had been mothering other people since before she was 10 years old. She met Marcus's father, Ray, in 1982. She was 26. He was 31. He was a musician. He played saxophone in a jazz club in Birmingham. He was beautiful and funny and irresponsible in a way that Dolores mistook at first for freedom. Marcus was born in 1984. Ray disappeared in 1985. He didn't leave a note. He just didn't come home one night. Dolores heard 3 years later that he had been seen in Chicago, then in Detroit, then nowhere at all. She raised Marcus alone. She worked at a hospital cafeteria from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m., serving grits and eggs and coffee to nurses and doctors who never learned her name. She worked at a dry cleaner from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., pressing other people's clothes in a room that got to 105 degrees in the summer. On Saturdays, she cleaned houses in the wealthy white neighborhoods of Mountain Brook and Vestavia Hills for cash. She never bought herself new clothes, not once in 13 years as far as Marcus could remember. She wore the same 3 dresses to church, rotating them. She never went to the doctor. She never took a vacation. She never dated, never remarried, never even, as far as Marcus knew, had a friend over for dinner. She simply worked, and she loved him, and she watched him grow, and she waited for the day he would grow up and go to college and become something more than what she had been able to be. And she died before she got to see it. Marcus lay in his $2,400 a night bed, and he thought about his mother, and he thought about Ayana Bennett, and he thought about all the things his mother had never gotten to have. The rest, the doctor's appointments, the scholarship someone should have told her about, the community program she qualified for and never knew existed, the tuition assistance at the community college 3 miles from her house that would have let her finish her own nursing degree in 2 years. His mother had been 3 semesters away from becoming a registered nurse when she got pregnant with him. She never went back. She died a cafeteria worker. And Marcus, lying in that bed at 3:14 in the morning, made his second promise. He had made his first promise at his mother's funeral in 1997, to become rich enough to escape grief. Now, 29 years later, he made his second promise. He was going to make sure Ayana Bennett got what his mother never got. Not charity, not pity, keys.
Over the next 3 weeks, Denise Okonkwo worked with a small team that Marcus quietly assembled. There was Reverend Anthony Freeman, the pastor of Bethel AME Church in Dorchester, who had known Ayana's family for years and who agreed, with strict conditions, to serve as the front-facing person for what they were building. There was Dr. Kendra Simmons, a black woman who ran the community outreach program at Bunker Hill Community College and who had been trying for years to get more single mothers into the Nursing Bridge program. There was attorney Marcus Reed, no relation, a bankruptcy and debt relief lawyer in the South End who worked pro bono for families of color and who agreed to review Ayana's debts. There was Ms. Gloria Hayward, the 72-year-old director of the Trotter Elementary School's after-school enrichment program, who had been trying, without success, to recruit Jamal Bennett into the gifted track since first grade. None of them knew who was funding the operation. They knew only that a private foundation, the newly registered Dolores Legacy Fund, was offering to sponsor a pilot program for exactly one family in the Roxbury-Dorchester area. The program was designed to demonstrate that comprehensive support for a single mother could break the cycle of generational poverty. The Dolores Legacy Fund had, as of that week, exactly one donor. And that donor had given exactly $40 million in seed capital. Marcus had signed the check without blinking. But the money was almost the least important part. What mattered was the design of the plan. The plan had 5 pillars. 1. Ayana's existing debts would be quietly resolved. Not through a gift, because gifts create shame, but through a legal restructuring framed as a debt relief scholarship for essential workers in the healthcare sector. Real programs like this existed. Marcus's foundation would simply expand one of them and make sure Ayana qualified. 2. Ayana would be offered a full scholarship to complete her Nursing Bridge program at Bunker Hill Community College. The scholarship would cover tuition, books, transportation, childcare during class hours, and a $2,000 monthly stipend during her enrollment to replace her lost second job income. The scholarship would be presented to her by Dr. Kendra Simmons as a Returning Student Equity Award, a real category that Bunker Hill had been quietly expanding for years. 3. Jamal would be enrolled, with Ayana's permission, in the Trotter After-School Enrichment Program and, additionally, in a Saturday STEM Academy at MIT that Marcus had funded anonymously 6 years earlier. Transportation would be provided, meals would be included, and a mentor would be assigned to him, a black male engineer named David Achebe, who would work with him for a minimum of 3 years. 4. Zuri would be enrolled in the state's Early Childhood Asthma Management Program, and additionally in a subsidized preschool at the Boys and Girls Club of Dorchester. Her medical care would be transitioned to a pediatric pulmonologist at Boston Children's Hospital through a program for underinsured children. 5. And, most importantly in Marcus's mind, Ayana would keep her dignity. She would not know, ever, that a stranger from a Walmart had made this happen. She would simply know that when she had been at her lowest, the community had shown up for her. The church had shown up. The school had shown up. The college had shown up. And she would carry forward into the rest of her life the knowledge that she was not alone, that there were doors, that she had every right to walk through them. Marcus reviewed the plan on a Sunday morning in his hotel suite. He read it 3 times. He made one addition. At the bottom of the document, in his own handwriting, he wrote, "In memory of Dolores Johnson, who taught me that love is a verb, and dignity is not for sale." He signed his mother's name below his own.
And then he told Denise, "Begin." Ayanna Bennett went to church almost every Sunday. Not because she was especially religious, though she believed, in the quiet way that many black women believe, in a God who was closer to a working mother than to any preacher on a stage. She went to church because it was the 1 hour of the week where she could sit down, where nobody needed her, where Jamal and Zuri were in Sunday school with other children, and she could close her eyes and breathe. Bethel AME on Warren Street had been her church for 6 years. Reverend Freeman was 68 years old, silver-haired, warm-eyed, the kind of preacher who had marched with John Lewis in his youth, and who preached still, with the fire and clarity of a man who had seen America at its worst and kept believing in it anyway. On the second Sunday of November, after the service, Reverend Freeman caught Ayanna at the coffee station and asked, gently, if she had a minute to speak with him in his office. Ayanna's stomach dropped. In her experience, being invited to the pastor's office was never good news. But Reverend Freeman was smiling, a real smile, warm and easy. And so she said yes, and she told Jamal to watch Zuri for 5 minutes, and she followed the Reverend down the hallway to his small office in the back of the church. He closed the door. He offered her a chair. He offered her a peppermint from the glass bowl on his desk, and she took one because refusing would have felt rude. And then he said, "Ayanna, I want to talk to you about something. And I want you to know, before I start, that this is not charity. This is not a handout. This is the community doing what the community is supposed to do. And I want you to hear me all the way out before you say anything. Can you do that for me?" Ayanna nodded, slowly. She didn't trust her voice. And Reverend Freeman began to talk. He told her that the church had partnered with a new foundation, the Dolores Legacy Fund, that was offering a comprehensive pilot support program for one family in the community this year. He told her that a small committee had been quietly identifying candidates. He told her that her name had come up because of her long history with the church, because of her work as a caregiver, because of her children. He told her about the debt relief scholarship. He told her about the Bunker Hill nursing program. He told her about the after-school programs for Jamal. He told her about the medical program for Zuri. He told her about the monthly stipend during school. And Ayanna listened, and she did not say a word for 11 minutes. And when the Reverend was finished, she was staring at his desk, at the bowl of peppermints, and she was trying to understand what she had just been told. Finally, she looked up. She said, "Reverend, why me?" And Reverend Freeman, who had rehearsed this moment because he understood that this question was the most important question, leaned forward and looked her in the eye and said, "Because you have never asked, Ayanna. Because you have carried this by yourself for 4 years, and you have never once come to this church with your hand out. Because your children are polite, and your rent is paid, and you show up here every Sunday and you smile at people. And half of us have no idea that you are working 2 jobs and going to bed hungry. That's why. Because the community sees you, even when you don't ask to be seen. And because Dolores Johnson, the woman this fund is named for, was a woman just like you. And when she died, there was no fund. There was no help. And someone decided that was never going to happen again on their watch." Ayanna's eyes filled with tears. She did not know who Dolores Johnson was, but she understood, somehow, in the way that black women have always understood one another across generations and cities and centuries, that Dolores Johnson was every mother she had ever known, including her own. including herself. She put her face in her hands.
And in the office of Reverend Anthony Freeman, on the second Sunday of November 2026, Ayanna Bennett cried the tears she had been holding back for 4 years. Reverend Freeman handed her a box of tissues. He did not say anything else. He just let her cry. Because sometimes the greatest gift you can give a black woman in America is the permission to stop being strong for 10 minutes. The first week was the hardest. Not because things went wrong. Things did not go wrong. Things went exactly right, in fact, in a way that felt suspicious to Ayanna, because in her experience, nothing in her life had ever gone exactly right without a catch. On Monday, she met Dr. Kendra Simmons at Bunker Hill Community College. Dr. Simmons was warm, professional, direct. She showed Ayanna the classroom where the LPN Bridge program met. She walked her through the schedule. She introduced her to 2 of the instructors. She handed her a folder full of paperwork. Ayanna filled out the paperwork with a hand that shook a little. She was accepted on the spot. Classes would begin January 13th. On Tuesday, attorney Marcus Reed called her. He walked her through the debt restructuring. He explained in careful language that her credit card debt and her medical bill and her utility bill were all being paid off through the Dolores Legacy Fund's Debt Relief Scholarship, which was structured as a legitimate financial hardship intervention for essential healthcare workers. Her nursing school loans were being deferred and would be paid off in installments as she completed her LPN certification. Ayanna asked if there was a catch. Attorney Reed, who had been asked this question by every client he had ever represented pro bono, smiled a small, tired, kind smile and said, "No, ma'am, there is no catch. This is what the program is designed to do. You just have to say yes." Ayanna said yes. On Wednesday, Ms. Gloria Hayward called her from the Trotter Elementary School. She talked to Ayanna about Jamal. She told her about the Gifted and Talented program. She told her about the after-school enrichment. She told her about the Saturday STEM Academy at MIT. Full scholarship, transportation provided, all meals included. A black male engineer named Mr. Achebe as his mentor. Ayanna asked, "Why didn't anyone tell me about this before?" Ms. Hayward was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've been trying to tell you about it, honey. But you've been working 2 jobs, and I've only ever caught you at pickup for about 90 seconds at a time. And I could see the tired on you. And I didn't want to add one more thing to your list. That's on me. I should have tried harder. I'm trying harder now." Ayanna said yes. On Thursday, a pediatric nurse from Boston Children's Hospital called her. She scheduled Zuri's first appointment with the pediatric pulmonologist. She explained the early childhood asthma management program. She told Ayanna that Zuri's inhalers, from that point forward, would be covered at no cost, and that a home visit would be scheduled to assess environmental triggers. Ayanna said yes. On Friday, she quit her second job. She sat in her manager's office at the CVS in Dorchester at 9:15 p.m., the last shift she would ever work there. And she told her manager, a tired white man named Kevin, that she was going back to school. Kevin said, "Good for you, Ayanna. About damn time. You always were too smart for this place." He shook her hand. She walked out. She sat in her 2011 Honda Civic in the parking lot, with 218,000 miles on it, and a noise she was going to finally have someone look at now that she could afford it. And she put her hands on the steering wheel, and she looked up at the ceiling of her car, and she said out loud, "Mama, I hope you can see this. I hope wherever you are, you can see this." She drove home. She put her children to bed. She sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee at 11 p.m., and for the first time in 4 years, for the first time, maybe, since Terence had died, Ayanna Bennett let herself think about the future. Not about surviving tomorrow. The future. The actual future. A year from now. 2 years from now. 5 years from now. She could see it. For the first time, she could see it. And she cried at her kitchen table. And no one heard her cry. And that was okay. Because these were different tears than the ones she had cried before. These were the tears of a woman who had just found out she was going to make it. Marcus watched all of this from a distance. He did not attend the meetings. He did not call. He did not send flowers or gifts or anything that might have identified him. He simply received weekly updates from Denise, and he read them at his desk in Manhattan, and he did not speak of them to anyone. But he wanted sometimes to see her. He wanted to see Ayanna, to see Jamal, to see Zuri, to see the family that his mother's memory had, through him, helped save. He resisted it for 2 months. But in mid-January, when Ayanna's first week of classes was ending, he found himself back in Boston for another board meeting. And he found himself, on a Friday afternoon, telling his driver to take him to the Trotter Elementary School's after-school enrichment program, where, as he knew from Denise's reports, Jamal Bennett was now enrolled. He told himself he would just look through the window. He told himself he would not go in. He told himself he would not, under any circumstances, speak to the child. He arrived at 4:30 p.m. The enrichment program used a classroom on the second floor. He climbed the stairs. He walked down the hallway. He stood at the door and looked through the small rectangular window. And there was Jamal. He was sitting at a table with 3 other children, working on what looked like a robotics project. He had a small blue Lego piece in one hand and a screwdriver in the other. He was concentrating, his tongue sticking out slightly, the way children's tongues stick out when they are trying very hard. Ms. Gloria Hayward was standing over him, watching him work, smiling. And Marcus watched Jamal, and he watched Jamal figure something out. The boy's face lit up suddenly, with the specific joy of a child who has just solved a problem. And Marcus felt something warm move through his chest that he had not felt in 29 years. It was pride. It was the pride of a father, or a grandfather, or an uncle. It was the pride his mother had felt when he had brought home a report card with straight A's. It was the pride he had never gotten to see on her face when he was accepted to Morehouse, when he graduated from Harvard Business School, when he made his first $1 million. Because she had not been there to see any of it. But Marcus was here now, and he was seeing Jamal. He stood at the window for 8 minutes. He did not go in. He walked back down the stairs. He got into his car. He did not tell his driver where to go for a long moment. And then he said, quietly, "The Walmart in Roxbury, aisle 9. The driver, his name was Anthony, and he had been driving Marcus for 6 years, did not ask questions. Anthony drove. Marcus got out. He walked into the Walmart. He walked to aisle 9. He stood in the exact spot where he had stood on that Tuesday afternoon in October. And he closed his eyes. And he thanked his mother. He said, out loud, in a voice that was rough and cracking, "Thank you, Mama. I heard you.
It took me 29 years, but I heard you. I hope this is what you were trying to tell me all along." An elderly black woman pushing a shopping cart walked past him. She saw him standing there, his eyes closed, his lips moving. She did not interrupt him. She smiled the small, knowing smile of a woman who had lived long enough to recognize a man who was talking to his mother. She kept walking. And Marcus opened his eyes, and he wiped his face, and he walked out of the Walmart for the second time in 3 months. And for the second time in 29 years, he had cried in public. He was starting to think this might become a habit. He was starting to think it might be a good one. By April 2027, Ayanna Bennett had a 4.0 GPA at Bunker Hill Community College. She was, according to her instructors, one of the strongest students in the LPN Bridge program in a decade. She had a particular gift for pediatric care. The professors noticed how children calmed around her, how she instinctively spoke to a scared 4-year-old the way you had to speak to a scared 4-year-old, which was to say honestly and slowly and with respect. Jamal Bennett had been officially placed in the gifted and talented track at Trotter Elementary. He had won a citywide Lego robotics competition in March. His mentor, David Achebe, had taken him to the MIT campus twice. Jamal had told his mother, one night at dinner, that he had decided what he wanted to be when he grew up. Ayanna had asked, "What do you want to be, baby?" And Jamal, 7 years old, chewing carefully on a piece of chicken, had said, "I want to be an engineer. I want to build things that help people, like Mr. David." Ayanna had put down her fork. She had gotten up from the table. She had walked to the kitchen, run the water in the sink for 30 seconds so her children could not hear, and cried for 2 full minutes. Then she had come back to the table. She had said, "Baby, I think that's the most beautiful thing anybody has ever said to me. I think you're going to be the best engineer this world has ever seen." And Jamal had grinned, and Zuri had grinned because Jamal was grinning, and Ayanna had grinned because her children were grinning. And dinner had continued, and outside her small apartment on Blue Hill Avenue, the April rain had begun to fall. Zuri had not had an asthma attack in 10 weeks. The pediatric pulmonologist at Boston Children's had adjusted her medication. A home visit had identified mold in the bathroom wall that Ayanna's landlord, after a strongly worded letter from an attorney whose name she did not recognize, had repaired within 72 hours. Ayanna had started sleeping 7 hours a night. She had not slept 7 hours a night since Terrence had died. She had gained 4 pounds. She had needed to. She had, once, in a fit of unexpected joy, gone to the beauty supply store on Blue Hill Avenue and bought herself a new lipstick. Just one. A dark plum shade called Nefertiti. She had put it on before class one Monday morning and looked at herself in the rearview mirror of her car and had not recognized the woman looking back. The woman looking back looked rested. The woman looking back looked like she had a future. The woman looking back looked like the woman Ayanna's mother had wanted her to be. She wore the lipstick to class. 2 of her classmates, young black women, also single mothers, also grinding, told her she looked beautiful. She smiled, and she said thank you, and she walked into the lecture hall, and she took her seat in the front row. Because now, finally, at 28 years old, she was ready to be the one who sat in the front row. In May 2027, 7 months after that Tuesday afternoon in aisle 9, Marcus Johnson wrote Ayanna Bennett a letter. He did not intend to send it.
He sat in his office in Manhattan on a Sunday afternoon, and he took out a piece of cream-colored stationery, and he wrote in blue ink. Dear Ayanna, you do not know me. My name is Marcus Johnson. I am the man who paid for your groceries at the Walmart in Roxbury on October 21st, 2026. I have thought about you every single day since then. I want you to know why I did what I did. My mother's name was Dolores Johnson. She was a single mother like you. She raised me alone in Birmingham, Alabama. She worked 3 jobs. She never went to the doctor. She died in 1997 when she was 41 years old, and I was 13. She died 3 semesters short of the nursing degree she had been trying to finish for 15 years. When I saw you in that Walmart, counting coins, putting food back on the shelf, telling your son you weren't hungry, I saw my mother. I saw the woman who raised me. I saw the woman who never got what she deserved. I did not know your name that day. I did not know your story. I did not know that you were also trying to finish a nursing degree, or that your son was gifted, or that your daughter had asthma. I did not know any of it. I just knew that I could not walk out of that Walmart and let you go home the way my mother went home so many times. The Dolores Legacy Fund was created for you. It bears my mother's name because my mother is the reason it exists. I want to be clear about something. You did not receive charity. You received what my mother and every mother like her should have received her whole life. Information, access, a community that saw her. That is not a gift. That is what this country owes every one of us and rarely provides. You did the work. You always were doing the work. All anybody did was open the door. I want to tell you also that I saw Jamal at the enrichment program in January. I stood outside the classroom for 8 minutes and watched him solve a problem with a robotics kit. I watched his face light up. And I want you to know, as a stranger who has no right to say this, but who is going to say it anyway, that you have raised an extraordinary boy. Your mother raised an extraordinary daughter. My mother raised me. This is what our mothers do. This is what you are doing. I will not contact you again. This letter will not be sent. I am writing it because I need to say these things to you, even if you never read them. But I want you to know that somewhere in New York, there is a man who thinks of you and your children the way he thinks of his own mother, who prays for you, badly and without practice, because he has forgotten how to pray, but is trying to remember, who believes, because of you, that his mother's life was not wasted, that she left a legacy, that her love traveled forward through time and found another mother in another city and made a difference. Ayanna Bennett, you gave me back my mother. Thank you. Marcus. He folded the letter. He put it in an envelope. He wrote her name and address on the envelope. And then he put the envelope in the top drawer of his desk, and he did not send it. Not yet. Maybe someday. Maybe not. But writing it had been the point. He closed the drawer, and he stood up, and he walked to the window of his office, and he looked out at the Manhattan skyline. And for the first time in 29 years, he felt his mother beside him. He said quietly, "Hey, Mama." He did not need to say anything else. Ayanna Bennett graduated from the Bunker Hill Community College LPN program in December 2027, 13 months after that Tuesday in the Walmart. She graduated with honors. She graduated at the top of her class. She had already accepted a position at Boston Children's Hospital in the pediatric asthma unit, the same unit that had cared for Zuri, where she would be starting on January 6, 2028, at a salary of $67,400 a year, with benefits, with a pension, with the kind of stability she had not known was possible for a woman like her. The graduation ceremony was held in a big auditorium. Ayanna wore a navy blue dress and a small pair of gold earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. She wore her Nefertiti lipstick. She had gotten her hair done at a salon in Roxbury the day before. She looked beautiful. Jamal, now 8 years old, sat in the third row of the audience, wearing a small blazer and a bow tie he had insisted on. Zuri, 5, sat next to him holding Bear. Reverend Freeman sat next to Zuri. Denise Okonkwo, whom Ayanna had come to know as a member of the Dolores Legacy Fund's board of directors, sat next to the Reverend. And in the back row, in the far corner, wearing a plain black suit and no tie, a tall black man sat by himself. Nobody noticed him. He preferred it that way. He watched Ayanna walk across the stage. He watched her shake the dean's hand. He watched her receive her diploma. He watched her turn to the audience, find her son and her daughter in the third row, and blow them a kiss. And Marcus Johnson, billionaire, sitting alone in the back row of a community college graduation ceremony in Boston, put his hand over the inside pocket of his suit jacket. The pocket where, 13 months earlier, he had placed a $27.94 receipt from a Walmart in Roxbury. And he wept without shame, without sound, without hiding it. The elderly black woman sitting one seat over from him, a stranger, a grandmother of one of the other graduates, reached over and patted him on the arm. She said, "Which one is yours, baby?" Marcus, unable to speak, pointed at Ayanna. The woman nodded. She said, "She's beautiful. You raised her right." Marcus did not correct her. He simply nodded. And in a way that only he understood, the elderly black woman was not wrong. Because Dolores Johnson had raised him right. And he had, in her name, raised something too. Not a daughter, a legacy. Ayanna Bennett would not learn the truth for another 11 years. In 2038, when she was 39 years old, when Jamal was 19 and starting his sophomore year of engineering at MIT on a full scholarship, when Zuri was 16 and applying to the same STEM academy her brother had attended, Ayanna would receive a package in the mail. Inside the package would be a letter on cream-colored stationery, written in blue ink, dated May 2027. Inside the package would also be a Walmart receipt from October 21st, 2026, folded carefully, faded but readable. Inside the package would be a photograph of a woman named Dolores Johnson, taken in 1996, standing outside her apartment in Titusville, Alabama, holding her 12-year-old son. And inside the package would be a note from Denise Okonkwo, informing Ayanna that Marcus Johnson had died 3 weeks earlier, at the age of 54, of a heart attack. The same heart that had run in his family. The same heart that had killed his mother. And that his final instructions had been to send this package to her, along with a bequest of $5 million, to be used at her discretion for whatever cause she deemed worthy in her mother's honor, in his mother's honor, or in her own. Ayanna would sit at her kitchen table on Blue Hill Avenue, the same table, in the same apartment, though she owned the whole building now, having bought it in 2035. And she would read the letter 3 times, and she would weep, and she would call her son at MIT, and she would say, through her tears, "Baby, I have to tell you a story." But that was still 11 years away. For now, for this moment, in December 2027, at her graduation ceremony, Ayanna Bennett walked across a stage and received a diploma. And she did not know that a stranger in the back row was watching her. And she did not know why a fund named for a woman she had never met had chosen her. And she did not know that a receipt from a Walmart in Roxbury was, at that very moment, resting inside the pocket of a billionaire's suit, like a heart still beating inside a chest. She only knew that she had done it. She had done it. She had done it. And when her son ran up to her after the ceremony and hugged her and said, "Mama, I'm so proud of you," Ayanna Bennett looked down at her boy and said the words she had waited her whole life to be able to say. "Baby, we made it. We really made it." They say that grief is love with nowhere to go. But that is only half of the truth. Grief, sometimes, is love that has been looking for the right address for a very long time. Dolores Johnson died in 1997 with love in her heart that never got to be spent. Love for a son who would grow up to be extraordinary. Love for a life she would never live. Love for a nursing career she would never have. Love for the granddaughter she would never meet, and the world she would never see. That love did not disappear when she died. Love does not disappear. Love travels. Love waits. And on a Tuesday afternoon in October 2026, 29 years after Dolores Johnson's love had first been set loose into the world without a place to land, that love arrived in aisle 9 of a Walmart in Roxbury, Boston. And it recognized itself in the face of another mother. And it went to work. Marcus Johnson thought he had built a fortress to protect himself from grief. But grief, in the end, was not his enemy. Grief was the doorway. Grief was the reason he could see Ayanna Bennett when other billionaires would have walked right past her. Grief was the reason he understood, without needing to be told, what she needed and what she didn't need, and what her dignity was worth, and how it had to be protected. His grief was his mother, still teaching him, 29 years after her death. His grief was Dolores, whispering, "Look, baby, do you see her? That's me. That was always me. Now go do for her what nobody did for me." And he did. He did. We inherit our mother's work. We inherit their unfinished sentences, their unspent love, their unbuilt houses, their unrealized dreams. The question, always, is what we do with the inheritance. Marcus Johnson used his inheritance to save a stranger's life. And in doing so, he saved his own. And in doing so, he passed the inheritance forward. To Jamal, who would become an engineer, and to Zuri, who would become a doctor at Boston Children's Hospital, in the same asthma unit her mother had once worked in. And to a foundation that, over the next 30 years, would support more than 11,000 single mothers of color across the United States in completing the education their circumstances had once stolen from them. 11,000 doors. 11,000 keys. 11,000 Dolores Johnsons, given, at last, the chance their own mother never had. Ayanna Bennett is 51 years old today. She lives in a brownstone in the south end of Boston that she bought in 2041. Her son, Dr. Jamal Bennett, is a mechanical engineer at NASA. Her daughter, Dr. Zuri Bennett, is a pediatric pulmonologist at Boston Children's Hospital, where she treats children with asthma the way she was once treated, with tenderness, with expertise, with the deep knowledge that comes from having been the small brown girl on the exam table once herself. Ayanna runs the Dolores Bennett Foundation, which she took over in 2038 after Marcus's death, and which she has grown in the years since from a $40 million endowment to a $340 million one.
The foundation has campuses now in Boston, Atlanta, Birmingham, Detroit, Chicago, and Oakland. It employs 187 people. It has changed thousands of lives. She wears her Nefertiti lipstick every day. She still lives in the same city where a billionaire once paid for her groceries in a Walmart on a Tuesday afternoon in October, when she was down to her last $23.47. She talks about him often. She keeps a photograph of Marcus Johnson on her office desk, next to a photograph of Dolores Johnson, next to a photograph of her own mother, Grace Bennett, next to a photograph of Jamal and Zuri when they were still small enough to fit in her lap at the same time. 4 mothers, 4 generations. One unbroken line of love, moving forward, refusing to end. And in the top drawer of Ayanna Bennett's desk, framed carefully behind glass, is a receipt from a Walmart in Roxbury dated October 21st, 2026. The total on the receipt is $27.94. The items are bread, peanut butter, oatmeal, milk, rice, chicken thighs, black beans, bananas, and toilet paper. Visitors sometimes ask her about the receipt. They ask why she keeps it framed. They ask what it means. And Ayanna Bennett, 51 years old, powerful, radiant, alive, smiles the smile that only survivors know how to smile. And she tells them the truth. She says, "That's the day I was seen. That's the day everything changed. That's the day a stranger who did not know my name paid $27.94 for my groceries and reminded me that I was not invisible. That's the day I stopped being alone." And then she thanks them for asking, and she goes back to her work. Because there is more to do. There is always more to do. Because somewhere, right now, in a Walmart or a Kroger or a Winn-Dixie or a Piggly Wiggly, in a grocery store in every city in this country, a young mother is counting coins in the palm of her hand. She is putting food back on the shelf. She is telling her hungry child that she has already eaten. And she is waiting, though she does not know she is waiting, for someone to see her. Someone will. Someone always will. Because love travels. Because grief is love looking for the right address. Because Dolores Johnson lives in every mother who has ever fed her child first, and in every stranger who has ever chosen to see her. Because the receipt from October 21st, 2026 is not a receipt. It is a promise. It is a covenant. It is the whole story of what we owe each other, printed on thermal paper, folded and tucked inside a billionaire's suit jacket, like a heart that had finally learned how to beat again. If this story moved you, if you thought of your own mother, your own grandmother, the woman who fed you first and ate last, share it, because somewhere, someone needs to hear it today. Somewhere, someone needs to know that she is not invisible. Somewhere, someone is waiting to be seen. Be the one who sees her. Be the receipt in the pocket. Be the door that opens.